Thank you for joining us for Sermons on Demand from Friendship Grace Brethren Church. We provide these videos as a way to share the pulpit messages and teachings offered at Friendship Grace Brethren Church. If you find these videos a helpful resource, please drop us a note at info@friendshipgracebrethren.com. Now open your Bibles and get ready to dig into the Word of God. Okay. Why didn't that go? There we go. There was a question asked earlier, jumping ahead a little bit from Jeremiah 30 and verse 9, but they shall serve the Lord their God and David their king, whom I will raise up for them. There are two schools of thought on how you would interpret this verse. This verse goes along with Ezekiel 34, 23 and 24. Ezekiel 34:23 says, "And I will set up over them one shepherd, my servant David, and shall feed them. He shall feed them and be their shepherd. And I, the Lord, will be their God. And my servant David shall be prince among them. I am the Lord, I have spoken." So there's two passages where David is referred to in a direct sense as ruling during the millennial kingdom. There are two schools of thought on how to interpret these verses. Some scholars interpret this that the reference to David is actually a reference to Jesus, a descendant of David, the Messiah. And so the descendant of David would be who's in view there. The other school of thought, the school of thought that I subscribe to, is that both David and Jesus will be ruling. David will be ruling Israel. Jesus will be ruling the world, which includes Israel. And if you take a literal, historical, grammatical hermeneutic, and we're studying that in Sunday school, so that will become more fluent to you. If you take a literal hermeneutic for what the Scripture says, it talks about David in a real sense. There's no reason in either of those two passages to sense the description or the word David is a reference to the Messiah. There's plenty of references that the Messiah will rule during the millennial kingdom, the millennial reign, for crying out loud. So there's no reason to believe that the Messiah won't rule and that David will rule, but there's good reason to interpret this that both will rule. And the references to David ruling are always to Israel, and the references to Jesus ruling include Israel and the world. So I think the safe assumption, the safe interpretation of it is David rules Israel and Jesus rules the world, including Israel.
Is the word "and" in the original text?
Are we talking in Jeremiah?
Yes, Jeremiah 30 verse 9. Is that word "shall serve the Lord their God and David their king"? Is that word "and" in there?
Let me see.
Because to me, if that word "and" is in there, you can't assume, there's no way to make it one person. Because then you have to split them in half to be an "and."
Yes.
The word "and" is there, then it can't be one person.
Well, it could be. It could be because the duplication of descriptors can be a sign of importance.
Okay.
It's a wow conjunction, and so I'm going to argue that the grammar doesn't necessitate it not to be, or doesn't necessitate it to be two, but it doesn't also say that it has to be two. It can be two or one. I don't think the inclusion of the vowel conjunctive there makes it be two,
Okay.
nor does it make it be one.
Okay. Because when you
Hebrew
read it,
Yeah,
it's obviously two.
right. Hebrew is really difficult in that, and I'm the first to admit I'm a terrible Hebrew scholar, and so I rely on a lot of other things. But what I can see and what I can remember of Hebrew grammar, it doesn't require it here.
Okay.
Now, my position is in the minority. The majority of Old Testament scholars would say it's a reference to the Messiah. I think it's a reference to both, and I think the reason that so many say that it's a reference to only Jesus is because that's what everybody's been taught for so long. They don't want to conflict with what they've been taught. Somebody was about to say something?
Yeah, what was the reference in Ezekiel?
Go ahead, Linda.
I got encouragement. I was talking with a friend. She called and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm right now in Jeremiah 30, verse 9. And I just stumbled upon the word and, and I said, it's Susanna and them, but now it's only Sibylla and nothing." And she said, "Yes, it is. It is Sibylla and Jesus." And that was a great encouragement when she said that.
Yeah. Linda?
What was the Ezekiel passage, please?
Ezekiel 34, 23 and 24.
Thank you.
I have that in my margin.
"And I will set up over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he shall feed them. He shall feed them and be their shepherd." See, that passage would give you the impression that David is the only one. But you have to look at the broader view that David is the shepherd of Israel, while Jesus is the Messiah or the ruler of the world. The Bible Knowledge Commentary, I think, puts it very cleanly. Where did it go? God said it will come eventually in that day. Instead of serving foreign powers, the nation will once again serve the Lord. The people will also submit to the authority of David, their king, whom God will raise up for them. Many scholars view this as a reference to Christ, who is from the line of David. However, there is no compelling reason not to take Jeremiah's reference in a literal sense, and then references Ezekiel 34. David is referred to by name elsewhere in passages that look to future restoration of Israel. So you can also see it in Ezekiel 37, 24, 25. "My servant David shall be king over them, and they shall have one shepherd. They shall walk in my rules and be careful to obey my statutes." And then Hosea 3:5. "Afterward the children of Israel shall return and seek the Lord their God, and David their king shall come in fear to the day and to his goodness in the latter days." So it's easy to interpret them both ways. The references to David there could be a reference to Jesus, or it could be a reference to David. And I believe that the cleanest hermeneutic makes it a reference to David ruling Israel and Jesus ruling the world.
Is there ever a reference that says Jesus only rules Israel?
No, there's just lots of references where he's the millennial king on the throne of David. That's the fly in the ointment, because Jesus is said to rule on the throne of David. Well, if David is ruling, where does he get to rule from? Because David ruled Israel from that throne. The idea would be Jesus would be ruling from a different throne, but he's clearly said to be the throne of David. So that's the fly in the ointment of it being two kings. I haven't figured out a way to work that out yet.
But like the British, we say the British throne, but right now, not that I acknowledge her. It's the King Charles sits on one throne and Queen Camilla sits on the other. But we don't differentiate either. It's the British throne.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. But I don't think we're talking about a necessarily just a physical throne. I think it is the majesty of the position that Jesus would rule from, what was the throne of David, from that position. But it's greater than that. So it adds some complexity to this, and I understand why some use the argument that it can only be Jesus. I just don't agree, and I came to that conclusion while I was studying to teach Ezekiel, because Ezekiel talks about it a lot, and then when I taught through the minor prophets, there were a couple of references to it also, and so the conclusion I made was it's cleaner, presents less interpretive issues by seeing it as both. I may be completely wrong. I mean, it won't be the first time today that I'm wrong. Just ask Linda. She'll tell you. But I think that's the cleanest way to view this. Does that help some, Sybil?
Yes, it does. Just before I met you, I never heard, and I heard you say it a couple times, and that's maybe why it's stuck in my ear or my eyes or whatever.
Yeah. And I readily admit, my position is a minority position. I'm okay with that. But I think that's the best way we can interpret what we're being told in the text. I wish it were easier, but it isn't. Okay, so anybody else have any other questions? That wasn't bad for the spur of the moment, huh?
That was pretty good. But now
Okay.
you got my brain spinning on something else. My brain is still not done spinning on what I was spinning on before.
Oh, good. I like that. Okay, read Isaiah 56, 9 through 12. What is this passage about, and what should we do with it in our world today? So basically I'm saying, what's the timeless principle, and what we're going through in Sunday school will help you figure out how to view it in its historical and grammatical context, and find the principle that can be then translated into our world today. So Isaiah 56, 9 through 12. Here's the text. Sorry. All you beasts of the field come to devour, all you beasts in the forest. His watchmen are blind, they are all without knowledge, they are all silent dogs, they cannot bark, dreaming, lying down, loving to slumber. The dogs have a mighty appetite, they never have enough. But they are shepherds who have no understanding. They have all turned to their own way, each to his own gain, one and all. Come, they say, let me get wine. Let us fill ourselves with strong drink, and tomorrow will be like this day, great beyond measure. So, what's this passage about?
The false shepherds of Israel or Judah.
That's part of it,
The
yeah.
prophets and the priests.
That's part of it.
Well, Sybil, we gave two parts. Somebody else has got to give another part.
Well, they both didn't do their job.
That's correct. That's absolutely
and
right.
warn the people. I mean, what are watchmen for?
Right,
To warn.
right. All
And
throughout
where are
Isaiah and
dogs for?
Jeremiah,
To guard.
all throughout Isaiah and Jeremiah, we have the the description of the failure of the priests and the prophets to and the leadership of Israel to properly do its job. And so you have this situation where Judah now is looking at failures coming. They're going to fall soon, and so there is a failure of leadership in Israel or in Judah to keep the covenant. The leadership, the upper crust, the high-ranking people in Israel, civil and religious, failed to do their job. In this passage, we see Isaiah talk about the failure of the leadership of Israel, and he calls on the beasts of the field and the beasts of the forest to come and devour them. Who are the beasts of the field and the forest?
The nations, the nations that will conquer them. Assyria,
Right.
Babylon.
Yeah, Assyria and Babylon, basically, right. Probably a generic reference to Gentiles, and probably for Isaiah specifically the Babylonians, but certainly Assyria was in there because we'll see in another question, Assyria is the power until the first attack on Judah by Babylon, because that happens immediately after Babylon takes Assyria in 605. So we'll see that in a little bit. So probably for Isaiah specifically, it is Babylon, the attack and conquering of Judah, punishment for the failure of Judah to remain covenantly bound to God. The watchmen are the leaders of Judah, both civil and religious. They are the prophets, not the prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah, but the hundreds of other prophets that they had. There were lots of prophets that followed or that didn't follow God and didn't lead the people properly. The priests didn't properly teach the people. So what's the principle then of the passage?
You have to teach us properly.
Very good. The principle of this passage is that God expects the leaders of his people to properly lead his people. God expects us to do that. Failure to do so will result in punishment. God will punish church leaders who work to enrich themselves and do not properly teach and lead the people given to them to lead. So verses like 1 Peter 5:2, shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly. There are more than 250 megachurch pastors in the United States currently making more than $1 million in salary.
Holy smokes.
Wow.
Really? There's a pastor that makes $1 million a
Oh, there's
year?
lots of them.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't think it would be that many.
Yeah, I was
I
surprised.
can't believe they make $1 million.
I was
don't know
surprised when I
any-
saw that statute, or that study, that it was that high.
I was writing, how many?
Over
How many
250. Over 250 megachurch pastors in the United States making over $1 million.
Wow.
Second verse that we need to think about is pay careful attention to yourselves and to all the flock in which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers, to care for the church of God which he obtained with his own blood. My calling, the calling of every pastor, of every church leader, is to care for the church and not himself. The
What
previous
was the Peter reference?
the Peter reference was 1 Peter 5:2.
Thanks.
Shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly.
In that shameful gain, can you include not necessarily monetary gain, but power and recognition?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So God said He's going to punish those that don't do that. The shameful gain. Peter's speaking exactly what was going on in Israel, in Judah. The leadership was getting rich while Judah was about to die. All the leaders were getting all that they could, while Judah was falling to the wayside.
My question then is, in my opinion, and I hope I'm right, at least I think I am, that applies not just to pastors, but it applies to deacons and deaconesses, Sunday school teachers, Awana leaders,
Every
anybody
leader,
who
yep.
holds authority over someone else in church.
Right, every leader. Yep. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get paid well. That doesn't mean that because you're not supposed to muzzle the ox treading out the grain. But what the criteria here is, what's the purpose of what you're doing? The purpose is we're to exercise oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly.
And why does someone need $1 million a year?
Well, I'm happy to study that.
G5.
What's that, Ann?
To put gas in this G5.
Yeah. I'm willing to study that, but you're going to have to pay me more to do that.
Well, go back into the verse 11. It says they have a mighty appetite, but they never have enough.
Right. Exactly.
They're greedy.
Yeah.
They're greedy.
Greed. Yep.
It's
You
greed.
need to get paid $1 million to do that research, Rich?
I need to get paid $2 million because $1 million will be spent on the research.
Okay.
Chuck must have got
Right.
home. Welcome,
Yeah.
Chuck.
I get home.
Yes, prayers answered. Yeah.
Huh?
That just floors me that there are pastors that make $1 million a year.
Oh,
That
my.
just has absolutely floored me.
Yeah, but look at the ones like Joel Osteen, and there's many others. They make a big thing about send me $25 and we'll give you a blessing for the week or whatever.
See, I don't think of Joel Osteen as a pastor.
No, because it's not a church that he runs. It
Just claim
doesn't
the
meet.
fame.
It doesn't meet the
Yeah.
criteria as far as I'm concerned for a church, but a
That's
lot of
just
mega
his
churches
claim to
don't.
fame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on then.
Sure.
Read Isaiah 65, 17 through 25. What is the subject of this passage? Isaiah 65, 17. For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former things shall not be remembered or come to mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem to be a joy, and her people to be a gladness. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and be glad in my people. No more shall be heard in it the sound of weeping or the crying of distress. No more shall there be in it the infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not fill out his days. For the young men shall die 100 years old, and the sinners 100 years old shall be accursed. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For like the days of a tree shall be the days of my people. And be chosen, and my chosen shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain, or bear children for calamity, for they shall be the offspring of a blessed of the Lord, and their descendants with them. Before they call, I will answer. While they were yet speaking, I will hear. The wolf and the lamb shall graze together. The lion shall eat straw like an ox, and dust shall be the serpent's food. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, says the Lord.
And what's the question?
What's the subject of this passage?
The millennium.
Yeah.
The new
Or the
heaven and new earth.
Then the
Thank you,
new earth.
Linda. Linda's right. Ding, 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 ding. She said the new heaven, the new earth. What happens often is we conflate eternity with the millennium.
Okay.
What's happening in this passage, we're talking about when perfection becomes reality. That is not the millennium. There will be still sin in the millennium. There will still be sinners in the millennium. There will still be non-regenerate natural people that live through the tribulation and enter in the millennial kingdom. Sin will still be possible. When we get to the new heaven and the new earth, that will no longer be true. Sin will be vanquished. Sin, death, and pain will all be gone. Yay. That will be great. And we enter into a period of time when sin won't even be possible anymore. And to say it's a period of time, it's eternity, so it can't really be a period. Can't really be time.
When does pain end?
Well, it's at least 1,007 years from now.
Oh, I thought it ended when we die and go to heaven.
Well, it ends for us, but it doesn't end for everybody.
Okay. All right.
But this tells us that there's going to be animals in eternity.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing, but I didn't realize we'd have animals in eternity. I knew they'd be in the millennium, but I didn't know that they'd be in eternity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they just aren't going to be your pets that you had when you were younger.
I don't know what purpose they'll serve in eternity, but now I know we have animals in eternity.
Well, just like they did in the Garden of Eden. See, here's what's happening. When we get to the new heaven and the new earth, things will return to what they were prior to sin in the garden, when God created and everything was exactly as he wanted it. I don't ever say that it will return to what God intended in the garden, because God intended the garden to be just like it was, with the potential for sin. But when we get to the new heaven and the new earth, we will be then past the potential for sin, but yet now having the knowledge of good and evil, of light and dark, of warm and cold, and so forth. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but God created the animals for man.
Yep.
But that creation isn't necessary anymore in the new heaven and the new earth.
Well, you can argue that it wasn't necessary for Adam either.
It was necessary for food.
After sin.
After the garden.
After sin, right.
Okay.
Well, technically, animals only became necessary for food after the flood.
Yes.
Everybody and everything were herbivores prior to the flood.
But still, they were, Adam and Eve had jobs. They were cultivating the ground. So if they were planting crops, they would need oxen or whatever to pull a plow. Would they not?
Yeah, probably. Although it would have been easier because it was made harder by the curse.
Sure.
But you're right. They still had work to do. It wasn't just they were lounging on clouds, drinking Mai Tais all day. That wasn't what God intended.
So what purpose will animals serve in the new heaven and the new earth?
Well, maybe will they talk?
Well, they did.
Yeah, so will they again?
I don't know. God doesn't tell us. I suspect probably they will, but
you don't know. That's
Could it be
Will we
showing?
be farmers in the new heaven and the new earth, since we've got animals?
yes.
Why? We don't need to eat.
But we still want to.
But
we
they
do.
show God's creative
wedding
power, don't they? Animals?
Yes, they do show God's creative power. What was that, Chuck?
I said, but we do eat.
Right. Right.
We have a feast waiting on us.
Right.
Okay, so how long does the wedding feast last?
Well,
It's over.
that's in debate. Some say 7 days, some say 7 years, so that the entirety of the tribulation, we're at the wedding feast. I don't know that there's anything in the text that will give me enough information to say one way or the other. But that's just the tribulation. And then we have the millennial kingdom, and then we have a season of unknown length when Satan is loosed again, and then we have recreation of a new heaven and a new earth, and everything is perfect. And when Satan is bound and thrown into the lake of fire, so is sin, so is death, and so is the potential for all of that. Pain goes with him. All the effects of sin go with him, and we enter into the rest of eternity. The problem is, because of songs and because of poor theology, we've conflated eternity with the millennial kingdom. The Lion and the Lamb laying down together, not the millennial kingdom. There will still be sin in the millennial kingdom. It's not till after that. So I think the simple answer to the question I asked, what's this subject about? The simple answer is salvation, and the complete, ultimate culmination of our salvation, which is not at our glorification, which happens at the rapture, but when pain and death and sin and all that are not even possible anymore, and we enter into eternity where we fellowship with him, which is at least 1,007 years from now.
Has to be more because Satan's loosed for a while.
Well, but we don't know how long that is. That might be a day, might be 10 minutes. We don't know. That's why I do know that there will be 7 years and there will be 1,000 years. I don't know what loosed for a season means. Neither does anybody else. So it's at least 1,007 years. Okay. This might be the last one because it's going to take a while, but we'll see. Read Jeremiah 1 through 5. What's important for us to see in this passage? Jeremiah 1 through 5. The words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah, one of the priests who were in Anathoth in the land of Benjamin, to whom the word of the Lord came in the days of Josiah the son of Ammon, king of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. It came also in the days of Jehoiakim the son of Josiah, king of Judah, until the end of the 11th year of Zedekiah the son of Josiah, king of Judah, until the captivity of Jerusalem in the 5th month. Now the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. So, what's important for us to see in this passage?
Chosen.
Okay, before you were chosen, yeah, right. Remember what we have to do when we look at any passage. We have to look at the literary context. We have to look at the historical context. To be a good Bible student, you also have to be a good history student.
Well, Jeremiah is prophesying during the end of Judah, during the siege of Jerusalem.
Right. We're given some specific information. Look at verse 2. To whom the word of the Lord came in the days of Josiah the son of Ammon, king of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. There's very specific factoids given to us. We know when Jeremiah started his ministry. We have that information. It was, if you needed to do the math, it was 626 BC. Jeremiah starts his his ministry in 626 BC. So what's going on in Judah in 626?
They're under siege because they're taken in 625.
Well, here
And the
here
siege is 2.5 years.
here I'll give you the list of what the major historical dates are that we need to remember. So in 639, Josiah becomes king. Here, I'll make it easier for you to see it. Is that easier for you to see?
Yes.
639, Josiah becomes king.
No.
623, the Book of the Law is discovered. Some would argue that the Book of the Law that was discovered was just Deuteronomy. I think it was probably all 5, but doesn't matter. In 608, the Battle of Megiddo, that Josiah is killed. That was a battle with Pharaoh Necho, and Josiah is killed. At that same time, Jehoiakim becomes king. 605, the Battle of Carchemish. Assyria was defeated by Babylon. That's an important date because that begins the siege of Judah by Babylon. By the way, that's also the same year Nebuchadnezzar becomes king of Babylon. So Nebuchadnezzar becomes king of Babylon, and he takes Assyria out, and he begins his conquest of Judah, all in the same year. You could also add to that, he takes out Egypt. His first year was the best year ever for a king in the Middle East.
Slow down a bit, please.
Okay.
I can't write that fast.
Then 605, as I said, the invasion of Babylon begins, or an invasion by Babylon of Judah. Then in 597, the second invasion of Judah by Babylon occurs, and 10,000 captives were taken to Babylon, probably the time when Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are taken. They may have been taken in 605. I didn't spend any time researching that. It's one of those two. I can't remember off the top of my head. And then 586, the third invasion. I'm sorry. In 597, also Zedekiah becomes king because Jehoiakim is killed. In 586, the third invasion of Judah, Jerusalem falls and the temple is destroyed. So those are dates that you kind of need to keep in the back of your head when you're talking about this period of Jewish history. And 586 is also when Gedaliah was appointed governor, and a remnant fled to Egypt, and they forced Jeremiah to go with them. So that's
Jeremiah went to Babylon.
Jeremiah went to Egypt first during the flight of the remnant.
And then from Egypt he went to Babylon?
He went back to Israel before he went to Babylon. So,
Rich,
go ahead.
hey Mary, if you couldn't write it all down, Rich, put that back up, and Mary, take a picture of it with your camera.
I just did. Thank you. I finally gave up writing.
Yeah.
You didn't do good in R. Wayne Schnieders' class, did you?
No, I did not. In fact, that's the only C I got in college, besides PE.
We saw him a couple years ago, 3 years ago or whatever, at Grace Village, and he still remembered both of us by name. That's just scary.
Yeah.
So those are the dates that you got to keep in mind, and the reason I bring those all up is that's part of what is being told in that verse. You're given the date of when his ministry begins. And if you know these dates, now you can calculate when his date of ministry begins. And so prior to 605, most of Judah was under the control of Assyria. Remember, Assyria had taken the northern tribes captive, and then they started working their way into Judah. They'd get repelled, and most of Judah, with the exception of Jerusalem, was under the control of Assyria. And then in 605, when Nebuchadnezzar becomes king of Neo-Babylon, he takes out Assyria, and he begins to invade the rest of Judah. At the same time, he goes down into Egypt, and he takes out Egypt. So he becomes the king of the world, basically, of that part of the world anyway, at that time, the most powerful man in the world. That's Nebuchadnezzar. And that's the environment that Jeremiah is writing in. That's important to have that information so that the historical context makes sense. So as you read the text then, Jeremiah is writing at the time of the failure of Judah. He's been given a message that's incredibly hard to hear. You're going to die. That's the message he's given Judah. You're going to get kicked out of your land, and many of you are going to die.
Yep.
But then God also gives him the beauty of verses 4 and 5. Before you were born, I knew you. I chose you for this mission. You were purposefully born, selected for this mission. That's got to give you some encouragement. But despite the conditions, he was responsible to follow God and to do what God told him to do, despite the conditions. What's somebody articulate a principle from that, from what we just saw in those verses of Jeremiah?
God actually knows us before we were born.
Correct.
And he has a job for each and every one of us to do.
Correct. In spite of the conditions we're in, he knows the conditions. He put us in those conditions. So, Sybil, now take that principle and apply it, or articulate it as applied today, as we should apply it today.
It is our job to talk with the people around us about God and what will befall them if they don't believe him.
Yeah. God chose us for the mission he gave us. Mm-hmm. He knew before we were born who we would be, who he made us to be, and he gave us a mission commensurate with the natural abilities and the spiritual gifts he gives us. Tony Webb uses the word birthright gifts, the gifts you're born with, the things that you're naturally good at. And then God uses those and combines those with the spiritual gifts that he gives you and equips you to do the job that you're to do. But it goes even further than that. He then, in the church age, puts together local churches of just the right people to do the job of that local church. I was working yesterday, we had a little bit of a quieter day yesterday, and I was working on doing some graphics and stuff, and I was researching some stuff, and one of the guys that I get some music and stuff from, Christian artist, had a video where he was talking about, should your small church do fancy graphics? Well, that's an intriguing title. Maybe, maybe not. And he said, no, if you don't have anybody that can do graphics. Yes, if you have somebody to do in your church that does graphics, because God gave them to you for a reason. Use the people you have and don't have jobs that you don't have people for. And that got me to thinking that's exactly the right sentiment. God puts together churches that contain exactly the right people to do the mission that he's given them to do at the time. And he's equipped the church to do what he wants us to do. He equipped Jeremiah to be the guy that had the hard message. I mean, do you think Jeremiah ever saw what the world would call success?
No.
Nope. But God said, look, I knew you before you were born. What's that?
Ezekiel didn't either.
No, Ezekiel's job was just as bad, if not worse.
Yeah.
Isaiah wasn't much better.
Yeah, most of them
Right.
didn't have
Hosea married a prostitute.
So you're looking at the principle coming from all of that is, it doesn't matter what your situation, God knows about it. He knew before you were born, and he called you to do what he called you to do. So buckle up, Buttercup, and do it.
You know, I have no problem with that, and I've known that. But sometimes it's just so hard to figure out what it is he's called you to do.
Well, yeah, that's true. So
I find that the hardest thing of all.
There are some things that have just been made plain in Scripture, right? Make disciples, teaching them to observe all the things that Jesus has taught. So that's clear. We got to do that. That's all of us. Then there are other things that we're told to do. We're told to be salt and light. And how do you do that? And so when you go through all the things that we're told to do, it doesn't leave a whole lot of stuff that we don't know what to do. The problem is we want specific things typed out for us in triplicate, double spaced, with proper indentation before we recognize, yeah, God wants me to do that. I think God's made it pretty clear what every Christian is supposed to do.
It's not that I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. That's not an issue. It's how I'm supposed to do it on a day-to-day basis, given your walk.
Yeah.
When I walk the dogs and I don't see anybody, how am I supposed to be salt and light?
Well, here's what we learned when we were doing our prayer walk, and we need to do that again. You start the walk by praying. God, I don't know who I'm going to see, if I'm going to see anybody today, but if you want me to talk to somebody, have them come out. If you don't want me to talk to anybody and you want me just to pray for them, that's fine too. And then as you're going by and you see a house and they've got an old junker car and maybe it looks like they're struggling, you just stop and pray for them. You don't need to know them. You don't need to even have a conversation with them. And then you move on and you keep walking. Or if you're in a place that has go-karts going around, not go-karts, golf carts.
Golf carts.
Yeah, we have coined the phrase prayer carting, and just driving around the community, and there's so and so they had medical problems. Let me pray for them as I'm going, and all you do is you say, God, if you want me to talk to him, send him out. If he wants us to talk to him, he'll send him out.
Yeah.
And then you just talk. It was Linda, was it fun when we did that? Kate, was it fun when we did that?
Say again, I was putting the kids to bed.
Oh, sorry. Was it fun when we prayer walked your neighborhood?
Yeah. It wasn't comfortable.
No, it wasn't comfortable. But we had Tony and Brian and I were walking together, and we had some great conversations with people. Maybe about the Lord, maybe not. But Brian's had the opportunity to follow up on them a couple of times. Kate Brian's neighbor, Wendy, we've had opportunity to follow up with her several times, and we've been praying for her. The pantry has helped her out, and that's all part of it. You just have to be open to God showing you what you need to do.
Yeah.
And then willing to do it.
I mean, there's no question that's what I've been doing. I mean, and it ends up with me taking a dog to the groomer today, or driving Donna to her iron infusion, or Candy to the doctor, or somebody to the grocery store, and then we have conversations. But it still is at times very difficult to know what you're supposed to do next.
Yep.
I find that the hardest part is the how, not the what, the how.
And that is just, you just have to continue to be open to what God wants you to do.
Whoops. Yep.
One of the things that I've been sharing with the ladies in Bible study too is to keeping your focus, always be focused on Jesus, no matter
Yeah.
what. And sometimes those bring you into opportunities that you aren't expecting. The last 2 times I've gone to the park with Harper, I've had opportunities to pray with the ladies in the park, with their kids and stuff, just because of where we were. And I told Rich the other day, it looks like the park might be my drawing card to my chagrin. That may not be where I want to go every couple weeks, but that seems to be a place where, young moms are hanging out, and, a place where, an unlikely place for me, maybe not so much for a younger person, but for me to be hanging out at the park with Harper, so that we have opportunities to speak to people. So,
Your mission field.
Right.
yeah,
Right.
right. Yeah.
Now, I just want to put a map up for you. In our passage that we read this last week, in Jeremiah,
That answers my question.
Jeremiah 4:5-8, we have a description of where the attack will come from the north.
From the north.
Right. So
Babylon's not north, it's east.
Babylon is due east of Jerusalem, but what's in between Jerusalem and Babylon? The Sino-Arabian desert. And at this period of time, there were no wadis that had water in them and no wells along the way. You couldn't make it on camelback across the desert without having lots of camels with lots of extra water. And so the normal way was to go up along the Euphrates until you are no longer in desert, go around through what is today Syria, Iraq and Syria, and then down into Lebanon. And that's how the attack came. So the attack is out of the north, but from Babylon in the east. And that confuses a lot of people.
Isn't that how God led Abraham?
Yes, exactly. It's a much shorter trip to go across the desert. To go through modern day Jordan, go out of Iraq in through Jordan and right into Israel. But that doesn't work. And so the trip was to follow the Euphrates north until you're out of desert and then go around and come in from the north. Every invading army that ever invaded Israel came from the north or from the south, never from the east or the west.
Since he's speaking, that's going to be.
So I wanted you to see that map, because I anticipated that some of you would have issues with what's being said.
Rich, in Jeremiah 1:11, it says, "And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Jeremiah, what do you see? And I said, I see an almond branch. Then the Lord said to me, you have seen well, for I'm watching over my word to perform it." What does an almond branch have to do with watching over my word?
The quick and dirty answer is the Hebrew word that is almond, and this is a note in the ESV. Almond sounds like a Hebrew word for watching. Compare verse 12. For I am watching over.
Huh.
But wasn't Aaron's rod made out of almond wood?
Yes, because it budded.
so almond is shached. And how's that for guttural, huh? That was pretty good. And
That's
watching is shoched. The difference in English would be a difference of an A and an O.
Yeah.
A short O and a short A. It would be the difference. You're muted, Linda. You're muted.
The MacArthur note is useful for that as well. It says the almond tree was literally the wakeful tree because it awakened from sleep in the winter earlier than the other trees blooming in January. It was a symbol of God's early judgment, as Jeremiah announced between 605 and 586 BC. And the second boiling pot pictured of the Babylon invaders bringing judgment on Judah.
And remember, the Old Testament was written in consonants only, no vowels, no vowel pointing. And so the words are identical in original. You have to go by the sense of the word from the surroundings. So I would argue it's a play on words. Shoched or shoched.
Speaking of the Old Testament, why did we, in quotation mark, have put a different order of the Old Testament than the Jews? Why didn't we take their?
Well, we would be, I forget what council it was that finalized the order of the Old Testament books. We have it differently because we have different books, only because some of the books are divided into two. First and Second Kings are one book in the Hebrew Old Testament. First and Second Chronicles are one book. First and Second Samuel are one book. Several of the other wisdom books are all tied together. And so
Ezra and Nehemiah are one book.
I forget what council it was that finalized it for the organized church. And decided that's what it was going to be. We cover the same material just in a different order.
Shaked.
Yeah. But they could have left it in the old order.
They could have. I don't really know the reason that they didn't. I would have to. I'd have to do some research to try to figure that out.
That's another million.
There's another million for you.
Thank you for watching or listening to this teaching on demand from Friendship Grace Brethren Church. Please consider sending us an email at info@friendshipgracebrethren.com to let us know how this teaching may have helped you. Please also consider joining us in person at Friendship Grace Brethren Church, located at 10251 Metro Parkway, Suite 116, Fort Myers, Florida, just south of the intersection of Metro and Colonial Boulevard. Sunday school begins at 9 and worship service at 10 a.m. We look forward to seeing you in person at Friendship Grace Brethren Church.